You're living through an inflection point in human evolution. Between tech like AI, quantum computing, and biotech, the next decade will bring about more dramatic change than the last 100 or even 200 years combined. Virtually every aspect of our lives is about to be disrupted. For the unprepared, this will be devastating. But for those that take the time to understand the most likely path forward, there will be huge opportunities. To help you better navigate what's coming, I bring you futurist Peter Diamandis. Given the state of AI and quantum computing, do you think that we're on the brink of human immortality?
I think we're on the brink of a health span revolution. I think immortality comes when we can scan the brain and upload you into the cloud.
You think that's the only way? We have to transcend biology?
People have to realize we're constantly replenishing all of the cells of our body anyway, right? Like the oldest cells in your body are your fat cells that are an average of 8 years old. Given AI, given quantum technology, we're going to start to understand why we age, how to slow it, stop it, maybe reverse it. And I think those things will get us north of 100 years. The bowhead whale, the largest mammal, can live 200 years. Greenland shark can live 500 years and have pups at 200 years old. And the question is, if they can live that long, why can't we? Mm-hmm. And for me, it's either a hardware problem or a software problem. And we're getting the tools to be able to deal with and edit our software, edit our hardware. And for people who are saying, well, am I going to be part of that? Am I going to live for hundreds of years? Am I going to have the chance to be immortal? I'm going to put aside the immortal part again. I think your mission should be, how do I live long enough, healthfully enough to intercept the breakthroughs that are coming? Right. So it's interesting. Someone asked me a question like, how long do you want to live? Right. And I remember when I was in medical school, I set a 700-year lifespan, which is a ridiculous number. It's ridiculous because if I can live, I think another 30 years from now, the breakthroughs we're going to see are going to buy you the next 30 or 100 years. So your goal is to live long enough to intercept what's called longevity escape velocity.
Yeah, that to me feels very plausible when I think about the magic trick that is AI.
Yeah.
Walk me through what you think is the rough timeline. And I fully acknowledge that looking into the future when you're talking about something as revolutionary as AI becomes a little bit comical, but I think that it helps to map how you think about how this is going to work,
right?
Like what the problems are that we're going to solve. Where's the intersection of AI and quantum computing?
Yeah.
You're the only one I really hear talking about that and its importance in this revolution. What is it about quantum computing you think is going to help?
Yeah.
Are there qualities of AI that are only going to be possible with quantum computing? What are the next steps?
Let me define, first of all, lifespan and health span. So lifespan is how long you live, how long your heart is beating, how long your brain is processing. Health span is how long you've got the vital energy to enjoy life. You know, get up in the morning, play with your kids, your grandkids, go for a hike, enjoy yourself, have the mental, physical vitality, right? That's health span. And that's really what we want. You know, if someone says, I don't want to live to 120 years old, it's because they have a mental image of being in a wheelchair drooling, right? That's not what we're speaking about here. If I said to you at 120, your mind was as sharp as that ever was, you could, hit the ground and do 40 push-ups and, would you want to live to 120? And I think anybody who is loving life would say yes. So that's our goal. It's that level of vitality. So AI is going to play in this by helping us understand such a complicated situation. So why do some people live to 100 or 115 or 120 and smoke, and still get that far out, right? Why other people die at 50 or 60? And I think aging is, in human biology, is so complicated that we're still deciphering it. We're still untangling this process. And there's so much data we can now get. And we've talked about, one of my companies, Fountain Life, is sort of like the most advanced diagnostics you can do. So when I go to Fountain Life, and we've got centers around the US, I will be digitally uploaded. So in the course of a day, I will have a full body MRI, an MRI of my brain vasculature, brain blood flow, a coronary CT, looking for soft plaque, DEXA scan, 120 blood biomarkers, metabolome, microbiome, your genetics, everything, right? So it's 150 gigabytes of data. And that data over the course of thousands of individuals can only be analyzed by AI. But then we can start to say, look, the people who were the healthiest and didn't have disease, or we can look at pre-symptomatic disease, and the people who developed this over time had this genetic sequence or had these blood biomarkers. It's the incorporation of massive data aggregation and AI that's going to help us understand why some people survive and thrive and others don't. And then what are the therapeutics? Look at everybody who took rapamycin or metformin or, was on, whatever drug combinations. It's so complicated, but we're running this massive experiment. And AI is going to help us to untangle that and get some insight and say, yes, for your genetics, for your age, for your objectives, these meds, these supplements are the best for you, right? That's one of the things I'm really working to build out for myself and our members at Fountain Life, is that kind of a correlation. Mm-hmm. Like what you want to do in life, your upload, your genetics, number of pills you're willing to take per day, this is the right combination for you.
Yeah, I think N of 1 is going to be a big part of this. Okay, I'm going to lay out my thesis.
Okay.
Tell me where I go wrong.
Please.
So one, I want to say that I come at this the way that a sci-fi writer would come at it. So I understand enough of it to get the gist and to be able to prognosticate. The specifics will be filled in by people that really know the science. But the way I see this playing out is that, okay, we need... This is a game of pattern recognition. There is
massive
a reason,
pattern recognition.
Right? There is a reason why we age. So step one is going to be by, I think, by getting into synthetic data very, very quickly. So we'll upload whatever the first 10,000, 100,000 people that go through something like Fountain Life, and we begin to speak the language of DNA, let's say, and we'll probably need to feed into the AI, not just human DNA, but across all kinds of species, feed it as much DNA as we can. It goes in, it learns the language of DNA. It begins to feed itself data and begin to try to predict different outcomes based on, okay, this environment with this genetic code, this drug interaction, whatever. Again, looking for the massive amount of data, but trying to parse out the different patterns in it so that it can isolate what the problem is. Now, with my very sort of layman understanding of all of this, my again, just guess at this point is that what's really going on is the epigenome is where all this breaks down. You know, David Sinclair's study as well as I do, which showed that even if you breed a mouse to just get massive amount of breaks in its DNA, over time, the DNA still looks the same. Like we are able to repair the DNA. It isn't what we used to think it was, which is you're getting these mutations in the DNA over time and the DNA is effectively getting corrupted. But something is happening. And so if that something is the epigenome where we're mistagging it, again, this is my layman's explanation of how this works, but they're going in and putting in the wrong bookmarks. For people that don't know how this works, your DNA is basically really tightly wound. And a little bit of it gets exposed to say, I'm an eye cell, I'm a skin cell, I'm a heart cell, whatever. And as you age, you're de-differentiating. And so your eye cell maybe now isn't purely an eye cell because parts of the DNA are unraveling. So it's a little bit of a skin cell, a little bit of a heart cell, a little bit of an eye cell. And so now this is where the function begins to degrade over time. If the AI can figure out, okay, cool, that really is the problem. This is exactly what's going on. Yeah. Here are the Yamanaka factors or whatever that you need to put to work to rewind the cell so that it resets. And so now we're getting the bookmarks in all the right places. That part once that's figured out, again, my gut instinct is that's going to be handled through the AI using quantum computing to be able to crunch just an unbelievable amount of synthetic data. So we don't have, because if you have to feed in millions or billions of people, like I just worry that that's going to take way too long for somebody of my age. But if we can do this via synthetic data, then the odds that it goes faster go way up.
Yeah.
Where's the flaw in that thinking?
Listen, when I was in medical school, I don't know, 35 years ago, I went arguably to the best medical, university and engineering schools on the planet. And none of this was being talked about, right? All of this is really, this entire conversation is the last 5-6 years. And it's moving very fast. It was heresy before I talk about longevity or age reversal. And now it's one of the hottest subjects on the planet because it's the biggest marketplace. I mean, what would you not pay for an extra 20 or 30 health years of life? So yes, we are, to echo what you said, if you think about it, each of us get 3.2 billion nucleotides, our genome, 3.2 billion letters from our mom and from our dad. And you've got that same genome when you're born, when you're 20, when you're 50, when you're 100, maybe when you're 150. But why don't you look the same if you've got the exact same instruction set? Why don't you have a 12-pack, if that's a thing, or a 6-pack, whatever, when you're 80, like you had when you were 20?
That one I can answer, but the face, I think, is because the 6-pack has everything to do with your lifestyle. If you're
but
putting
if
on
you
too
were,
much fat,
okay,
it is what it is.
I mean, my point simply being is, why don't you have the physique or the ability to build muscle or everything of your youth when you're 100? Why is there a difference? And it isn't your genome. It isn't your 3.2 billion letter instruction set. It is what you just said a minute ago, your epigenome. Epi for the Greek word for above, and it's the control system. And you're right. When you're just born, or when you're 10, or when you're 20, when you're 80, different genes are on and different genes are off. And the epigenome is the control of which genes are on and which genes are off. At the highest level, it is the control of the genes for skin are on in your skin cells, and the gene for your hepatocytes are on in your liver. And so there are different cells. They've differentiated, silencing certain genes and saying, your genes aren't needed here in the skin cell. You don't need to be, purifying out urine, right? And so as you age, what apparently is going on is that the control of which genes are on and which genes are off are beginning to blur. And as you're getting older, the genes that should be off are turned on, or the genes that should be on are turned off. I'll give you an example. Skin. The supple skin of a child, of a newborn, right? Part of what's going on is we have something like 23 collagen genes, and we express multiple collagen molecules that make your skin, give it the texture and so forth. But as you grow older, we begin to silence some of those genes. And so the collagen molecules of the 23, maybe only 8 or 9 are expressed. And so you start to get, wrinkles, and, your skin starts to look that of an old person. But can you turn them back on? So one of the companies, my venture fund, Bold Capital, is an investor in, is Marble Biome, and it's using genetic engineering, epigenetic reprogramming, to turn back on those genes, right? To give, to take back the look and feel of your skin 30 years. So can we do that across multiple parts of the body? Can we rejuvenate you in that regard? And that is definitely one of the hottest topics out there right now. Can we turn back the clock? And in December 2020, David Sinclair wrote a very famous paper in which he demonstrated turning back the clock in the retinal visual systems of mice, basically reprogramming the epigenome to go back to where it was earlier and giving mice that had lost their vision renewed vision. And one of his companies, Life Biosciences, is now doing that in primates, right? And
Have
once
they already done it?
they're doing it in primates right now.
And have they shown that it has the same retinal impact? Or
I believe they have.
Whoa.
And, you know, we're then a fraction of a step away from humans, right? So this is the hot conversation of epigenetic reprogramming on one element, AI on the other. And I really fundamentally believe that we're within striking distance to making a dent in human aging. And I mean, you know, that's why you and I are here in this moment. We just announced our $101 million Health Span X Prize, challenging teams around the world. It's the largest prize ever in human history. Challenging teams to restore function in muscle, immune, and cognition. Hopefully this is a age reversal therapeutic that teams will deliver. We're just looking at 3 systems. If the teams going after this Health Span X Prize are doing something that at the root cause is hitting aging, then they're likely to hit aging throughout the body. We're only going to measure immune, muscle, and cognition because those are easy to measure. And for me, as I get older, I want to have the immunity to fight infectious disease and cancer. I want to have, the muscular vitality to, hike and play with my great-grandchildren, right? And the cognition to be sharp for decades to come.
Okay, so one of the things that I care deeply about is the timing of all of this.
Yeah, me too,
so
buddy.
with the prize, they have 7 years, right?
So we announced this now in what month did we hit? November, December of 23, and it's a 7-year time frame.
Why 7 years? Do you think that's...
I set 7 years originally because if an X Prize, the original X Prize, the first one I launched back in 1996 was a $10 million prize for spaceflight. And again, these X Prizes are not for a paper study. They're not for an idea. A team has to actually demonstrate the thing, and then they get the money. And they keep their IP. The world gets the benefit. And the first X Prize took 8 years. It was launched in 1996. It was won in 2004 when Burt Rutan, backed by Paul Allen, built Spaceship One that Richard Branson then bought the rights to and created Virgin Galactic. And since then, our prizes have typically taken anywhere from 2 to 8 years. We had one prize, a $30 million race to the moon that Google funded. It was at a 10-year horizon. It did not get won. It got shut down, though 2 of the teams actually made it to the moon shortly thereafter, but crashed on landing.
Interesting.
But they still, got to lunar orbit and still made there, which is a big, big deal. A Japanese team and an Israeli team. So by setting a deadline on a prize, you force teams to actually do something versus sit back. If it's there forever, they'll take, the race element does help them accelerate, but a deadline, when you're facing a deadline, you're gonna take even more aggressive action. So 7 years for me felt the right length. The second thing is one of our largest donor in this prize is a group called Hevolution, which is it's a global nonprofit based out of Riyadh and out of the US. And Saudi Arabia has a 2030 vision of really, they have a lot of projects culminating in the year 2030. And it just so happened that that is the culmination of this prize as well. So 2030 works from that perspective as well.
When I think about AI and the rate of advancement, so I come at things from an entertainment perspective. And when I look at what's happened in the last 11 months, quite frankly, it hasn't even been a full year that I've been paying attention to text to video, the leaps are pure insanity.
It is. It's insane. I was just looking at Emad's latest stability AI, which is fast as you're typing.
Yeah.
There's an ape with an orange on its head hanging from bouncing on a trampoline. And as soon as you add words, the images are changing. It's insane.
It's crazy.
We're a micro step away from from Hollywood movies being produced by describing them in words.
Yeah, given the rate of change in the last 11 months, I'm going to guess in the next 5 years, you will see commercials and things done entirely just text to video. I
think it's the next 2 years, 5 years.
It certainly could be in the next 3. Just given the amount of UI changes they'll have to do, my gut instinct is that you're looking at least 3 years. But so when I think about the advancements in longevity, when I look at what humans have been able to do just in the last 10 years, it's already incredible. When you slap AI onto that, then it gets nuts. What do you think is going to be the contribution of quantum computers? How real is that right now?
Yeah, so we're in the early days of quantum computing, to be clear, right? Quantum computing is a complicated subject, which I'm not going to do service to be very clear, right? So classical computing is basically computing that uses ones and zeros on an integrated circuit and a typical binary language. Quantum computing uses qubits that are basically can be anything a 0 or 1 or anything between a 0 and a 1. And what we find is it really represents the real world. We're living in a quantum world. We're not living in a binary digital world. We model the world using very advanced binary systems. We model on a molecular level. So, for example, DeepMind, which is part of Alphabet now, right, which created a program called AlphaFold. And AlphaFold, I remember when I was in medical school, or when I was an undergrad at MIT at the time, the big grand challenge of the time is, could you predict how a protein would fold? So a protein is the basic building structure of the body. It's a structural material. It's an enzyme. It's muscle tissue. It is a sequence of amino acids. There are 23 essential amino acids here. These amino acids, when they're assembled in a ribosome, read from DNA to RNA to a protein, the sequence of amino acids that are like Lego blocks strung together begin to fold into a very predictable 3D structure. And that 3D structure is everything. That 3D structure determines what that protein does, how it functions, how it interacts in a antibody. And it was always considered, if you could go from an amino acid sequence, like I can tell you the sequence of the amino acids in this 1,000 amino acid sequence, and if you could tell me how it would fold, that would be the most incredibly powerful predictive engine on the planet. And it was a supercomputing problem. And it was a couple years ago now that AlphaFold, an algorithm out of DeepMind, cracked that problem. It was able to go from an amino acid sequence to predicting a protein within a single atomic diameter accuracy.
Whoa.
And then it went on to predict every protein and how it folds in the human body. And then Meta created their own version of that and was able to predict every protein in the biological ecosystem. It's gone insanely fast, right? So now we can start to design proteins versus just find out what nature. We want a protein that has a certain shape that interacts with a certain key and lock on the surface of a cell. But that's all being done in binary. That's all being done with AI algorithms operating on GPUs. At a atomic and molecular level, we are quantum systems. And the belief is that quantum computers will be able to enable us to model what's going on at a much higher level of fidelity, much faster. And so that we can start to understand the fundamental elements of how life itself works in a much deeper way and start to model things. I don't know what factor to use, trillions of times faster than the classical computer. because it takes a lot of energy and a lot of time to model things. But quantum is going to be able to model chemistry and model biology at lightning speeds. So I believe we're going to see, 2023, 2024, we're seeing the inflection point of AI.
What does that mean?
It means we're seeing AI growing at unbelievable speeds. What you said a few minutes ago, that it's like it's awesome. It's unbelievable how fast it's moving. And typically an inflection point is like it's a slow, like AI. So AI began, the first conversations in AI were in 1956 at Dartmouth University. A group of a dozen people came together to talk about this idea of, can we model intelligence in
They spent like a
systems?
summer trying to do it, right?
They to try and get the theories and think through it, right? And then neural networks were proposed not very long after that. But we didn't have the computational power until this past decade to actually start to put these algorithms into play. And so while AI is 56, 60, 70 years old, it's only now that we're seeing this massive inflection. It's the knee of the curve. It's the point where its speed is so fast, right? And now we're going to start to see AI programming AI, and it becomes self-referential and accelerates even faster. So quantum is still slow. Meaning we're getting systems, we're beginning to learn how to utilize it. There's like 2 or 3 public quantum compute companies. A friend, I don't know if you know Jack Hittery. No. Jack is on my board of trustees at XPRIZE. He spun out of Google a company called Sandbox AQ. Yes. Right? Eric Schmidt's the chairman, and Jack is the CEO. And A stands for AI and Q stands for quantum. And it's a company that's really bringing together AI and quantum computing. And his belief is it's going to be most impactful in a few key areas, and biology and chemistry is one of those key areas.
Do you find yourself hunching over your desk and battling back pain after a long day of work? Invest in a chair that is designed to improve posture, prevent pain, and maximize productivity. Anthros is built to be your last office chair, and I'm telling you, this thing is amazing. It's guaranteed to be the most comfortable chair on the planet while also improving your posture and reducing pain or your money back. And I'm telling you, it is also the most fun chair you are ever going to sit in. I know that sounds ridiculous, but you have to try it, trust me. I have an Anthros chair myself, and it is not just me. Everyone in this office fights over this chair. I am not kidding. I have never had more fun or comfort sitting in a chair. This thing is amazing. Head over to anthros.com/impact and get $200 off your purchase.
That to me is really fascinating. The fact that we're going to be able to manipulate the building blocks of biology is pretty crazy. Where do you think that our ability to predict the folding of proteins goes? How do we use that? What comes of it?
So now the question becomes, what drug do you want in order to handle a certain situation? So we're going, drug discovery up until now has been, you go in the Amazon forest and you forage for different leaves and stuff, and you take it back to the lab and you see what you got, right? Like rapamycin, which is one of the longevity medications out there. I'm not going into detail about it, but it was discovered in a soil sample from Easter Island, which is known as Rapa Nui. And that rapamycin got its name from that. So this random process of like just finding stuff and trying to purify it and see if it has an effect on anything is going to go, we're going to flip the model to saying, okay, what exactly do we want to interact with this receptor on this cell or block this chemical process inside of the mitochondria, and we're going to design it. And then we'll see, does it interact with anything else? We're going to start to create in silico models, right? Compute computer models of cells in high fidelity to understand what's going on and how you want to tweak it.
Do we already have the ability to manufacture this stuff? Or
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And there's a company called In Silico Medicine. Alex Zeverankov, who is the CEO there, is a friend. My venture fund's an investor, full disclosure. And they have In Silico Medicine is, as the name says, we're going to create medicines in simulation on computers and then manufacture it and then show that it works. And they have drugs in phase 2 or phase 3 right now that we're designing a computer for a particular medical condition, and it's working out.
how does drug discovery work exactly using AI?
You're going to understand a molecular process inside a cell that is causing a disease. And you're going to say this particular molecule is a waste product that's accumulating that is causing this disease. And can we create a protein that might go bind that molecule in a highly accurate fashion that when it's bound blocks the disease from occurring and allows your immune system to clear it, right? So we're going to start to tinker with, and the question then becomes is, does that molecule you've designed to block a particular reaction or a waste product, does it have a secondary negative effect that you don't want, right? So you're still going to go through clinical trials to determine that there's no downside of that.
Will that be more of a, we have to do it, but in reality, we've already run the simulation 6 ways to Sunday inside the computer?
There will be a point in the future. So for example, when SpaceX launched the Dragon capsule to the space station for the first time, it worked. It worked perfectly. They're great engineers, but the reason it worked fantastic is they had a highly accurate computer model of the entire system. And so they modeled it in high fidelity and it performed like the model said. And so, for example, more recently, we see Starship making serial advances as it's going towards orbit. Of course, you know, the Crisis News Network and all the media say, "Oh, Starship fails." It's like bullshit. It was an amazing incremental success. You know, the first ship got to a certain point, the second ship got further, the third one will probably work perfectly because those ships are highly instrumented and all the data is coming back, and the data is being used to advance the models and saying, "Aha, this is actually what was going on, and so let's change this engine or this structural entity." And we're going to start to do the same thing in biology, which we're going to start to gather enough data and instrument and understand what's going on where we can eventually get to a point where we have a highly accurate model of the human cell. And not just a cell, but maybe it's an organ, maybe it's a 1,000 cells or 1 billion cells. And we're going to know that this particular designed protein or medicine, whatever it might be, works perfectly. And we'll get to a point where you don't need to go through a massive clinical trial. How far is that away? It's probably not the next 5 or 10 years, but it is probably 20 to 30 years out. But the cost of these, right? And then, by the way, this drug works for me, not for you. By the way, do you know, I don't know the exact number, but it's pathetic. When a drug is approved by the FDA and you're prescribed that drug, what percentage of time the drug actually works for you?
I've heard this before. It's either 40% of the time it works or 60% of the time it works.
No, it's like under 20%.
No way.
Yeah, it's and I want to check that number so I have it, but it's when a drug goes through the drug discovery process, you know, the first goal is do no harm.
Yes.
And by the way, most of the drug discovery process for the last century has been done or safety trials have been done in men only.
Yep. There's a good reason for that, though.
Well, the reason was that drug companies didn't want to deal with menses and menopause
Correct.
and so forth, right? It was inconvenient.
There's just so many more complications.
But
to
what
the female
happened was when
hormonal
drugs
cycle.
were taken off the market because they failed, it was because they hadn't tested them in women. Because why assume that this drug that we developed for a particular condition that was safe in men is also safe in women? Anyway, so first is do no harm, and then does it work? And when the FDA approves a drug, it worked in enough people that it was worth approving. But it doesn't work in 100% of the current circumstances, and it's a minority number, and I'll have to check on that.
I'm shocked if the punchline is that the number is that low. That would certainly speak to the placebo effect, because I've never taken an over-the-counter drug. It's not true. It's not that I've never taken one that I didn't notice anything, but the ones that I take with frequency, I'm like, whoa, these really work. My allergy tablets, my decongestants.
And by the way, it may well be for a narrow course of drugs, but it doesn't have to work for everybody.
Yeah. So, all right, let's look at all of this through the lens of where this goes and why it's going to work. So when I think about the problems that AI has to solve in terms of understanding human biology, what's happening, that really becomes the goal of AI is to ascertain what are the set of rules of physics effectively. How do I then map that onto a cell? How do I map that onto all the cells that make up an organ? How do I map that onto all the cells that make up a human body?
So that's eventually. Right now, so for example, when you go through Fountain Life, and I hope you will, I would love to take you and Lisa through it. We're opening up in LA in Q3 of this year. Super excited about that.
That's amazing.
We're going to download 150 gigabytes of data about you, and we have, like, when we do your coronary CCTA, for people listening, listen. If you've heard about a calcium score, it really is kind of irrelevant. People have a heart attack with a 0 calcium score. People with 1,000 don't get a heart attack. It's unless if your artery's blocked or you have blockage in an artery that you see some calcified plaque, that's an issue. You have to make sure that your coronary arteries that feed oxygen and blood to the heart muscle are patent and open and feeding it. But if the plaque on the side of your arteries isn't blocking the artery and it's calcified, meaning it's like you have cement on the walls, but the blood's getting through, that's fine. What causes the heart attack is soft plaque that isn't calcified, that can, in the middle of the night, break off and evulse, and all of a sudden you got a widowmaker, right? It has blocked
because it goes downstream, blocks
it blocks the artery, and your heart muscle doesn't get blood flow, and it dies. And then you have enough of a heart tissue dies, you have a heart attack, you die. Mm-hmm. And so it's just now using AI, to go back to this, that you can take a coronary CT of your heart and put it through a set of AI algorithms that can find soft plaque, not the calcified plaque. And so we do that. We have an AI overlay on that to determine.
Meaning it's just getting better at reading the images?
It's looking at the data differently than before. Before, all we looked at was calcified, and we've discovered that isn't the issue. It is the issue if it's blocking like a 50% occlusion of your left descending artery. So we get data coming in, 150 gigabytes of data about you, and this data all needs to be looked at by humans, but that's so much data, there's no way that any human physician can understand all of that data. It's way too much to grok to understand and hold in mind, but AIs can. So the first use of AIs are going to be to look at the data coming off of your coronary CT, look at the data coming off of your full body MRI, to look at the data coming out of your 120 blood biomarkers, and then looking at those individually and then aggregating them all.
Right, looking at the population level.
That's where we are today with AI. Down the line, being able to look at on a physics level, subcellular, cellular level, all of that stuff, sure, that's coming. But we don't need that to make a huge difference right now.
It's interesting. Okay, so I'm certainly compelled by where the science is today, but the thing that I am obsessed with is
where's it going?
Where it goes.
Yeah.
And do you think we live in a determined universe?
I sure hope not. That'd make it kind of boring, though.
Really? How do you?
Well, it
doesn't seem avoidable to me.
It wouldn't change anything I do if we were a determined universe. So the question becomes, if we were, the question for me is, does quantum mechanics make it deterministic or not?
Because of probability.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll give you again, coming at it like a sci-fi writer and not like a scientist, but the way that I think about quantum is, okay, even if the universe that we live in is simply the most probable universe, it is still predictably probable. And this is exactly why we can create GPS, which is a great example. So with Newtonian physics, you can't do GPS. With Einsteinian physics, you can do GPS because it takes into account relativity and it becomes specific enough that you can really nail something down. I'm perfectly willing to accept that it's possible that all the dice get rolled at exactly the right way and I fall through the chair because just every gap in the chair lines up, with exactly. So could that happen? Sure, but that's probably not likely. And so given that we're in the most probable of all outcomes, this stuff gets predictable. Now, I don't understand quantum physics well enough, but
So Bell's theorem.
I don't know Bell's theorem, at least not by that name.
Bell's theorem is every time a decision is made, A or B, the universe splits.
Okay, so that I certainly have heard that.
And so we're living in a branch of the universe that was determined because I said the letter B instead of the letter A.
Right. Yeah. What do you take away from that, though?
Well, it's deterministic in an infinite number of ways.
Yes, but that wouldn't change your experience.
It wouldn't change my experience of it, no.
Yeah, so just without it sort of devolving into the many fractal branches, which from a theoretical standpoint or a philosophical standpoint is fun to think about, but from an experiential standpoint, the reason I asked this question, by the way, for those listening, I promise you this is going somewhere, is that when I look at AI and what AI has to do, the reason I think AI becomes the most transformational thing we will ever experience is because it will finally be able to map out a deterministic universe. And once you know the setup, then you can predict the outcome, which is why I was asking about how understanding the folding of a protein, like what powers is that going to give us? So as a game developer, one of the things that I think a lot about is how you can create a very simple set of rules that has tremendous complexity.
Yes.
And so I have a feeling that Einstein was right, that there ultimately will be a very simple equation that will be self-evident in its elegance that, oh, this is what the universe is born out of, because ultimately it is going to boil down to a set of rules, and it is the set of rules that give rise to the complexity. But this is why, and this is one thing that always fascinated me, that people without going to space could predict what space was going to be like, and therefore say you have to build a spaceship this way, you have to account for the way the gravity is going to change. And Einstein called his most beautiful thought, I think is how he referred to it, that oh God, I forget how it's actually explained, but what weightlessness is, like fundamentally, that somebody that was falling but had no reference point would simply experience it as being weightless. Oh, that's a horrible explanation. But anyway, gets you close enough. So the fact that he could just think about the rules of the universe and be like, this must be true. For this to be true, this is the necessary consequence. And that he struggled with his own theories and the predictions that they made in terms of quantum mechanics.
So did you see recently both DeepMind and OpenAI released weather prediction models that were accurate 11 days out?
Whoa.
So this is fascinating. And I saw this morning a prediction model on Bitcoin. So
tell me more, Peter.
Yeah, well, it was trending up through the end of the year. Not a huge amount, but it was trending up. I'm a Bitcoin believer.
You
but
and me
anyway,
both.
So anyway, the point being interesting, right? Can AI make accurate predictions in seemingly massively complex systems like weather? I mean, I can't think of anything more complex than weather, or the financial markets. I mean, now it becomes fascinating if you're actually able to predict. And then the question becomes, well, if you can predict that, and I know, does that change my behavior?
Yes.
When that changes
in weather, no. In financial markets, yes.
Yeah. I mean, this goes back to, I'll ask you the question. My thesis is we're living in a simulation, and it's an nth generation simulation. We're living within a simulation, within a simulation, within a simulation, because I think we're going to have the technology to be able to do that. And we will because we can. And if that's in fact the case, I would do nothing different than I'm doing right now. We're in a game. How do you feel about that?
It's interesting. So I'm actually wearing the shirt right now. So I'm wearing a shirt for the video game that I'm building called Project Kaizen, which takes that as its hypothesis, which is everything you've ever known is a simulation. You have no body anywhere. There is no biological you. This is a simulation. And then once you know it's a simulation, then you can begin to manipulate it effectively. And that is me, again, as a sci-fi writer, trying to explore what it will mean to understand the rules by which all of this apparent complexity is born out of. Yeah. So for a long time, and look, honestly, it's only been in the last month or two that I've started thinking, maybe this really is a simulation. Just because the more I do thought exercises, probing at the edges of what would it mean for this to be built on a set of rules, and why would it be built on a set of rules, and what built it on a set of rules, you just start asking things back recursively. And look, I map to what I understand. Of course. And since I understand simulations and video games, I map it to that. And so there could just be a fundamental flaw in my thinking, and I'm perfectly happy with that. But it does get harder and harder for me to exempt myself from the likelihood that this actually is a simulation.
So I believe it inherently, and I can't prove it. And again, even though I believe it, it doesn't change anything. I remember years ago, I was at a birthday party that Elon had. Larry Page and Sergey Brin, and Elon and I are having a conversation before the falling out, having a conversation about whether we're living in a simulation. And I think, I don't know if it was Larry or Elon said, yeah, the only way we're going to find out is if you try and tamper with it and the system resets. Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating. I wonder if this has been a subject of conversation in ancient philosophical times as well. Have you ever seen any references to that?
Plato's Cave.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very much the same idea. Again, mapping to what he knew. He knew campfires and shadows. And
two dimensions and three. Yes.
Exactly. So that becomes the way that you think about it. But I think as people really begin to investigate the human mind, it is inevitable that you start going, hold on a second, you're seeing the world differently than me. And so then you go, wait a second, are either of us seeing the world the way that it actually is? And then once you understand that we're not, that we necessarily couldn't be, that my umwelt is different than a bat's umwelt, and therefore we are going to perceive everything very differently. And then you start going, wait a second, we're perceiving the world instead of just encountering it as it actually is.
So the technology that's going to come to make a dent in that is going to be BCI, brain computer interface, right? So if I'm able to connect my mind to your mind, I think there's going to be an interesting set of correlates. So there are dozens of companies right now working on, so you had 100 billion neurons in your brain, 100 trillion synaptic connections, and the neocortex, the top layer, is your sensorium and your homunculus of action and all, your visual cortex, auditory cortex and such. And one can connect the digital signals in your brain or the electrical signals in your brain to electrodes and connect them to a computer. And those things are happening right now. Elon's got his Neuralink. There's a company actually here called Paradromics, which is doing that as well. There's a lot of amazing companies. And so we're going to start to be able to understand visually. One of my favorite recent AI blow your mind examples was a group took subjects and put them inside of a functional MRI machine, which is looking at blood flow going through different parts of the tissue in your brain. And the more the blood flow, the more the neurons are active because they're using more glucose and oxygen and so forth. And they took the output of the MRI and they fed it into Stable Diffusion. And they gave the subjects in the functional MRI machine an image to look at an image of an airplane, look at it and think about that. And then they took the signals out of the fMRI and were able to see the person was looking at an airplane.
That's crazy.
Right. And they
so
did
it could interpret the brain signals to say, this is what you're looking at.
Yes.
Yo.
Awesome.
That's mind reading.
That's mind reading. Yes. It is mind reading. And so we're heading in that direction. And so one of the things I think about is you and I both are not a single living organism. All right. You have to think about that. We're a collection of 40 trillion human cells, 30 trillion if you're smaller, 50 trillion if you're bigger. And those human cells are each individual living organisms working together.
And also competing for resources.
Actually competing, but the competing yes, and supporting each other in the distribution of resources. You also have more than those 40 trillion life forms in the form of bacteria and virus and fungi as an ecosystem in your body. But you're not, we think of ourselves as Tom or Peter, but we're far more. I think we're heading towards a point where if I can connect my brain to the cloud and you can connect your brain to the cloud, and all of a sudden I've got godlike powers with a small g. I'm omniscient, omnipotent, I'm omnipresent. I can know anything. I can think and Google. I can look through your eyes, or through the eyes of someone watching a sunrise in Tokyo. We're now a meta-intelligence. We're at a new level of empathy and connection between humans. I love Star Trek, as you well know. Are you Trekkie or Star Wars?
Star Wars.
I'm so sorry for that. You're wrong. You picked the wrong part, but it's okay. The only thing that Roddenberry got wrong was the Borg. The Borg are the evil networked minds. But I think we're going to head towards a level of consciousness on the planet as we start to connect millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of individuals. I think we become conscious at yet another level. I call that a meta-intelligence. And I think that's coming as well. Enabled by AI, enabled by this brain-computer interface. You can imagine if I gave you the ability to connect your brain to the cloud and you plugged in for that moment, and all of a sudden you could understand what you want, you knew anything you wanted, you were connected to this new vault of infinite knowledge, and then I unplugged you, how would you feel? I think you'd feel so lonely. and disconnected. So I think once you plug in, this is more the Matrix than not. So we can go to one of your favorite genres, but I think that's coming, enabled by AI. Let me go one other slight subject, and then we can you can take it back where you want. We just had Visioneering at XPRIZE. XPRIZE, we hold an annual event called Visioneering where we brainstorm ideas, and that would become great XPRIZes. And this past Visioneering, we had a couple of good AI XPRIZes. One is AI for truth. When someone makes a statement, can you have an AI algorithm that's able very rapidly to say factual truth, here's the roots of that, this is opinion, or this is disinformation? All right, I think that'd be very useful in our coming world. The other one, which was AI-mediated communication between any two species.
Whoa.
Right? Can I talk to whales or dolphins in a consistent, accurate, two-way fashion?
That'd be nuts.
That would be amazing. Yeah.
I'd love that for my dog. That would be a trip.
I know.
Be a trip.
But it would be, take me out, food, pet
Yes.
me. I mean, but, on a consistent basis, you can imagine, if you could talk to whales and dolphins, they would help you explore the oceans, or talk to birds. There's a kid that's missing in the forest here. Help me find them.
Dude, so that's very interesting. And I know the way your brain works, and you take a very beautiful, optimistic look at that. It would be utterly fascinating. So killer whales are vicious, and they will go eat a great white's liver just because they can. And they will toy with dolphins. There are dolphins that will kill other dolphins and they'll mess with them. Dolphins that try to have sex with humans. I mean, just on and on. Like, it's
I've heard
crazy.
the stories.
And I have a feeling that were we to actually be able to communicate with animals, it may be a little more distressing than we want to believe. I read a story a long time ago, and I did find this very interesting. This speaks to your interpretation of the Borg as being a misread. And it was these creatures that had these tails that had like these almost fiber optic tendrils. And when they would connect them...
Sounds like Avatar.
Yes, I would be shocked if he hadn't read this story, because it is very similar to that. But this was years ago. I read this probably 30 years ago, 35 years ago. And they would connect their tails and they would instantly know the entire history, emotional milieu of the person they were connecting with. How amazing. And what was interesting was how... once you could no longer lie or hide anything from anybody, there was a relaxed sort of acceptance of yourself.
This is who I am, like it or not.
Yeah.
This is who I am. You got your own bullshit. I've got mine.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, and when I think about it on a relationship side, and this is something that, talk to Lisa more about, the ability to be absolutely brutally honest about your feelings, about your desires, about everything you've ever done. I mean, how many people actually have people in their lives that know everything about you, where there's zero to hide? I mean, it's like in a relationship and you look at a woman and go, wow, she's gorgeous. And you're willing to say that or something that you were ashamed of having done, but everything is fully disclosed. I think that level of intimacy would be amazing. Amazing.
It would be. Oh man, the symmetry that would have to be there though, because if there's even slight imbalance of...
Sure. And therefore a lot of relationships would not work. But when they do click, and there's full disclosure and your deepest likes, deepest fears are fully known to both sides, it is a level of complete honesty. And I mean, someone who knows you as well as you know yourself. I mean, we're going in a very different conversational subject, but I think that was something I would desperately love. And I have a few friends in my life where it's like they know almost everything possible. And it's not that I wouldn't disclose things to them. It's just we've never had those conversations. And those are the people closest to me. right?
For whatever dysfunction I have, only my wife knows me like that. I don't know why. I don't.
Well, just share it with me now, right now.
Yeah, there you go, live on camera.
And then you'd have 1 billion people know about it.
The funny thing is that I don't actively hold things back. Like, I'm a pretty open book, but it is like, there's something about sharing your life with somebody where they see all the, like, what do you like when you're sick? What do you like when something goes really well, when something goes really poorly? And there's just too much intimacy for there to be any posturing whatsoever, because they just see you too often. Right. Yeah, it's interesting.
So these are the things that AI are going to enable. Imagine with this level of BCI where you can't lie. I mean, interesting, right? Because you could probably make up simulated truths that you honestly believe, and people do that. Anyway, going back, where do you want to take this back to? Let's rewind the tape here.
Well, so the thing that I want to know, so this is all very interesting to me in terms of where this goes and how far out it gets, and it really does become quite fascinating. But right now, there are tremendous opportunities for people that really understand what's going on. Obviously, Bold Capital, this is a big part of where you place your bets is, do I understand a little bit more than other people where this is all going? So what is the right now today bridge? What are the opportunities that somebody listening to this should understand, whether it's AI, quantum computing, longevity? Where are the big opportunities?
So I believe without question the two biggest business markets on the planet are AI and longevity, right? If you think about from a national standpoint, a national leader of a country should care about the health and the integral of intelligence over their country. If you could increase the intelligence of your nation by 20%, right, or the health of your nation by 20%, massive, right? Or in a company, increase the intelligence of your workforce or the health of your workforce. These are huge levers to move. I'm often keynoting inside of companies or YPO events or other, about those two subjects. I mean, that's my typical, that's all that matters right now, AI and longevity. And I'll ask people in a wealthy group, individuals, I mean, honestly, how much of your capital would you give up for an extra 20 healthy years? And if they're honest about it, it's well over 50% of you're going to spend it anyway at the end of your life.
Yeah.
Right. Trying to deal with.
Wouldn't you give 100%?
I think people would, but then they say, well, I'm going to leave it to my kids, or I'm going to leave it to my philanthropy, or whatever the case might be.
Hold on. I want to paint a scenario. You are before.
I am with you. Listen, I don't want to leave the money to my kids
on their behalf. I want to understand this mindset because this is shocking to me. You're before a credible source. Let's call this credible source God, just to make it easy. And God is like, hey, bro, button on the left, you get 20 extra years, but you're going to give me every dime, all of your assets, everything.
Yeah.
Button on the right, you die tomorrow, but you get to give your family all your assets.
Yeah.
You're telling me that there are people that hit the button on the right?
100%.
Whoa.
Because people want to leave a legacy. Why the hell do you give $1 billion to Harvard? Do they really need another $1 billion? You want a legacy there. People want to know that they're going to live, their legacy is going to live after them, whether it's in the form of their kids or the form of their name. And so, there's a balancing act. Maybe it's 20% that they would hold back.
But those are not the buttons before you. There is no 20%. There's all or nothing.
Yeah.
But wow, okay. That's crazy to me. But
going back to your question, I think longevity is one of the largest business opportunities that's going to materialize over the decade ahead.
So how do you take advantage of it? What are you doing to be ahead of the curve?
Well, building companies there in that. So Fountain Life is my biggest company I'm building for a global footprint for enabling everyone to have access to the best therapeutics and the best diagnostics, right? The diagnostics are, is there anything going on inside your body right now you need to know about? If there is, you want to know because you can take action. We find 2% of the people who go through Fountain Life have a cancer they don't know about. 2.5% have an aneurysm they don't know about. 14.4% have either metabolic disease, neurodegenerative disease, cardiovascular disease, something you need to take action on right away.
And so the thesis there is your body no longer needs to be a black box.
Yes, the thesis is your body's amazingly good at hiding disease. Incredibly good.
And you're better off confronting
You're
it.
better off knowing as early as you can because you can do something about all of these things.
And why now? What is now?
Because the tech is there to image at high fidelity without the false negatives. And the tech is there to understand what the data means. Right. So a friend of mine, super successful individual, who I'm doing business with in Fountain Life, and he wanted to go through the experience, goes through the experience, and we discovered 2 aneurysms in his brain.
Wow.
Serious aneurysms. He's in surgery a week later. They're clipped and blocked, and he's fine in that threat. But had he not, it was a ticking time bomb for him. Right? We all know people who have, oh my God, they died in their sleep. Or they go to the hospital and the doctor says, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you got stage 3 or stage 4, whatever it is. It didn't happen that morning. It's been going on for some time. You just don't know how. So the stats are the following. 70% of people who have a heart attack had no previous symptoms, right? You don't detect cancer until it's stage 3 or 4 from a pain or something going on. It is a slow, your body's amazingly good at hiding it. You don't develop a Parkinsonian tremor until 70% of the substantia nigra neurons are gone. And so you need to look. And people say, I don't want to know. I say, bullshit, of course you want to know. As early as you can. Fully know.
Because there's now things you can do about it.
Things you can do about it, for sure. Medicine has progressed incredibly well. And it's moving. And if you're wealthy, you want to know, because I'm going to fund the research to solve that thing.
Right.
So in Fountain, the 2 questions is something going on you need to know about today? And if there isn't, fantastic. I go every year for my upload, and then I'm tested throughout the year on stuff that I'm incrementally improving. And the second thing is, what are you likely to develop? And how do we push that off? How do we solve that? How do we reduce your chance of heart, neurovascular, whatever it might be? So that's what I'm building. I built a couple of companies, one in stem cells with Bob Haruri, who's a CEO there, called Cellularity, another one called Vaccinity, that's developing vaccines. So vaccines are amazing things. Your brain is the most complicated machine in the universe that we know of. Your immune system is the next. Your immune system is protecting you against infectious disease and against cancers, right? We're all developing cancers all the time. And your immune system, your natural killer cells, find those cancer cells, right? Because cells replicate a certain number, it's called the Hayflick limit, 50, 60 replications, and then they should have the decency to die. If they don't, they can become senile cells, putting out inflammatory factors, or they can become cancer cells, immortal cells, and they grow. And your natural killer cells detect those cancer cells and zap them. But as you grow older, you have something called immunoexhaustion. Your immune system starts to slow down, and you don't detect it, and they can start to grow. And so if you can find cancers on MRI, there's things called the Grail test, which take a liquid biopsy, blood biopsy, and looking for cancer DNA in your bloodstream. And so you can do something about these now. Vaccines, that's where I was talking about vaccines. So vaccines, we know about it from mRNA vaccines for COVID and such. But we can now develop vaccines to activate your immune system to fight cancer, like go attack that.
You can vaccinate against cancer.
That's where there are cancer vaccines now being developed. The first one that was approved by the FDA was for melanoma, which is one of the most deadliest cancers. One of my companies, Vaccinity, has a vaccine in phase 2 for Parkinson's. Going to phase 3 for Alzheimer's. We have a phase 1 asset in hypercholesteremia. So a vaccine which goes, you vaccinate yourself, it activates your immune system to go after a particular enzyme in the liver called PCSK9, which creates the bad cholesterol, LDL, low density lipoproteins. And that vaccine, which you'd vaccinate yourself twice a year for, 2 injections a year, injections might be $20, $50, basically drops your cholesterol level down. So I have hypercholesteremia in my family. My dad had very high cholesterol, whole slew of medical stuff, so I'm very sensitive to it. I don't want to do statins. I take a very small amount of statin for an anti-inflammatory effect. That's a different story. But I take something called Repatha, which is a antibody that's manufactured in a vat. And I get a few mLs of this, and I have to inject it every 2 weeks. That antibody goes to that PCSK9 enzyme in my liver and blocks it from producing LDL. Now, it costs me $10,000 a year, and I have to do it every 2 weeks. But it drops my LDL level down into a beautiful green zone. I'm using these antibodies produced in a manufacturing plant and shipped to me. What we built in Vaccinity was a vaccine that I inject, and it causes my own immune system to manufacture that same antibody for free to block that PCSK9 enzyme. That makes sense?
Yes. And you're doing that now?
Yes. I'm not, well, we're developing the vaccine right now. The first results were amazing. We're, going from phase 1 into phase 2. Long story short, the ability, there are these monoclonal antibodies, which are like the top selling drugs. And it's using these antibodies, which are proteins, to go and block a certain process. We talked about that a little bit earlier. But they're expensive. But the idea now is, instead of manufacturing these monoclonal antibodies in a vat, in a pharma manufacturing plant, can you just teach your own immune system to produce that same antibody? And that's the future of vaccines. The vaccine is playing your immune system like an app.
My wife Lisa struggled profoundly with her gut health and experienced debilitating stomach pain. So I focused my energy on learning everything I could about the human gut. Viome is on the cutting edge of this growing area of study with their at-home gut intelligence test. Just 2 to 3 weeks after sending in your sample, you can see your results on 20 integrative health tests that measure your inflammatory activity, metabolic fitness, and the health of your gut lining. As a special offer to my viewers, Viome is offering $110 off your test. Just go to tryviome.com/impact and use code IMPACT to get the $110 off.
Okay, let me see if I can boil that down to a thesis. So for somebody that is trying to figure out where the opportunities are right now, because we're living in this hyper disruptive time, I want people to be aware of the ways in which things are being disrupted so that they can go in and take advantage.
We're going back to the investment side here. So listen, we're in the middle of a biotech winter right now. Just to be clear, there was, if you look at all the biotech companies out there, they're significantly depressed. So if you're playing the public markets and you find companies that have good cash position and have strong potential drug candidates, it's a great time to buy, because the stocks are all like 10 or 100-fold depressed. So I just put that out there 1 second. I think I think the medical system, the healthcare system is so broken, it's pathetic. I think it's gonna crumble under its own weight. And so we're gonna reinvent how we deliver healthcare. I think at home, we're all gonna be monitored. So I'm wearing a continuous glucose monitor right now. I've got my Oura Ring, I've got my Apple Watch. So there's gonna be a whole slew of wearables. All of that wearable data is gonna monitor me 24/7. So one of the things we do at Fountain as well is we bring in all your wearable data. So in between your annual uploads, which are deep dives into you, we're monitoring what's going on. So we're going to see AI.
Are you making recommendations based on what you see?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So for supporting your sleep, for supporting your diet. So my continuous glucose monitor, right? And there's companies like Levels, or there's Free Libre, there's others that measure how your body reacts to eating those peanuts or that Snickers bar, and how quickly your blood sugar elevates and how quickly it goes back down. And based upon that, going into pre-diabetic or becoming a diabetic, your glucose is a poison in the body. I don't know if people realize that. Our bodies were never designed to eat as much sugar as we do. Mm-hmm. And glucose sticks to proteins, and then your immune system sees that glycosylated protein as a foreign and attacks it and causes inflammation. So a lot of cardiovascular disease and neuroinflammatory disease is a result of people's diet. But you don't talk about that. No one talks about that.
Okay, so I was going somewhere slightly different when I said thesis. So I don't necessarily mean investing, but I mean if I can create an overarching thesis on what it is that links all this stuff together. So your interpretation of where we are in the world right now, as I understand it, is your body no longer needs to be a black box.
Yes.
We now have the imaging capacity to see what's going on. We have the ability to do something about it. There are therapeutics that are advancing now very rapidly.
Yes.
Where you can leverage the body's own systems in a intentionally triggered fashion, whether that's through vaccines, whether that's through some other mechanism. But we have a deep enough understanding of the body's mechanisms that we're able to trigger those and get them to go in and clean up, whether it's LDL or something else.
And people need to realize that your health is something you can do something about. And if I think about having a longevity mindset, and what does a longevity mindset mean? It means I believe, and I do believe this, that this next decade, we're going to see incredible progress. And 10 years from now, we're going to have the ability to live an extra 20 healthy years.
What do you think that progress is going to be in? The ability to manipulate the immune system?
So I think it's a lot of what we're doing on this X Prize we just announced, right? So we get $101 million from Hevolution, from Chip Wilson, who is the founder of Lululemon, who put up $26 million plus another $10 million purse for his disease called FSHD. It's a muscular dystrophy. And we're asking teams to reverse the functional loss in muscle, immune, and cognition, right? So you're moving well, you've got great immunity, and you're thinking clearly. And so over the next 7 years, we're going to have incredible progress in those areas. That's one of the I don't want to call it, it's one of the thrusts that I'm focused on moving the needle forward. And so if you believe that we're going to have this progress, your longevity mindset needs to be, I'm going to do whatever it takes to live long enough to intercept these other breakthroughs. So I arrive at this point in reasonably good health. So for me, that's the thesis, that we're going to have these breakthroughs from biotech, from cellular medicines, from gene therapies, from CRISPR technologies, from all of these things, from AI. And if I'm able to keep myself in good enough health, I'm going to intercept these, and it's going to buy me the next 20 years. And during that time, there are going to be additional breakthroughs that will buy me the next 20 years. If you want that, if you love life and you want to see what's coming in the next, century, there's good reason for you to take care of yourself.
What does that look like?
Taking care of yourself right now, there are things that people need to be doing. And I wrote a book that just came out called Longevity, Your Practical Playbook. I just wrote a book last year with Tony Robbins called Life Force. We did a conversation about
Great book.
and it's 700 pages, and it's amazing. And very few people get through a 700-page book. So I wanted to write a very practical book that looks at and says, this is what I'm doing, and this is what I think is science backs. And I put it into a few very simple chapters. Number one, what to do about diet, because there are fundamental things. We can come back to that. Sleep, exercise, like the most important thing, right?
You think exercise is more important than diet?
And I'll come back to that. So they're all important. Diet, sleep, exercise, mindset, super important. Not dying from something stupid, which I call doing your upload at Fountain, like knowing what's going on inside your body, and then meds and supplements. So the book looks at that. I actually, I made a reduction, that was the word, a reduction of that into what I call my practical, Peter's longevity practices, which I have a copy over there, which is free for people. It's a 25, 30 page, like this is what I'm doing and why.
At Diamandis.com?
At Diamandis.com/longevity. And you can get my book there. You can get this PDF download, and it's very definitive. So listen, there's no one diet for everybody. I've been a vegan. I've been a keto diet. I'm mostly Mediterranean, but the things I've discovered is, number one, sugar is a poison. Minimizing your sugar and why. Whole plants are critically important. Even the order in which you eat your food matters. Mm-hmm. Like if you're given, like you go out for dinner at a restaurant, when they bring you the bread and the wine, ask them to bring it back during the dinner course. If you're going to eat the bread, at least dip it in olive oil first to blunt
glucose absorption.
We're talking about not spiking your glucose immediately, right? Which is the worst thing you can do. It really drives you to
So why bring it back? Is it eating proteins first?
So what you want to do is on your plate, eat your vegetables first. If it's asparagus, if it's broccoli, if it's a salad, the fiber slows down your digestion. Eat your protein next, and then eat your carbs last. It slows down your sugar spike. It actually allows you to absorb the best nutrients out of your plate of food first. So even making that small, you'll lose weight, you'll get better nutrition, and you'll actually feel full having eaten the best stuff first. Right? So it's just a really small trick that I'm just like, once I learned that, I was like, okay, I need to tell everybody about it. It's just small. The order in which you eat your food matters, right? So there's a whole bunch about diet there. Exercise is probably the single most important thing. I have stepped up my exercise from like 2 or 3 days a week to 5 days a week.
Your physique has changed dramatically.
Yeah. I've added muscle. I mean, it's my goal to add muscle. Muscle is one of the most important pro-longevity parts of your life.
Are you doing TRT?
I am. I do take a certain amount of testosterone, and it's simply, I don't actually feel different. I am taking a small amount of testosterone simply to support muscle growth.
Do you base it on blood levels?
I do.
What do you steer towards?
I'm staying in like 800 range, and sometimes up to 1,000. But
does it increase your libido?
It doesn't. It doesn't impact my. It doesn't touch my libido.
What?
Doesn't. I mean, my libido is fine, but I don't. If I'm off it or on it, it doesn't make a difference. And people who've got, I don't think I exhibit grouchy old man syndrome. So I'm like the most positive person I know.
No doubt.
But I'm using it specifically for supporting muscle mass, but then I'm doing 150 grams of protein a day. I'm having creatine. I'm taking amino acid supplementation. I'm focused on adding muscle mass. As you grow older, adding muscle becomes harder and harder.
Yeah.
And one of the unfortunate mechanisms that a lot of people die as they go into their 70s and 80s, I'm 62 right now, is you fall because of muscle weakness. You break a pelvis or a hip. You end up in the hospital. It's painful to breathe. You get a pneumonia, and you're down for the count, right? It's happened to my dad. Happens to a lot of people, and the survival rate post a hip or pelvis fracture, if you're over 70, is like really low. So you don't want to do that. You want to maintain muscle mass. Also maintains your stem cell population and your blood in your muscles. So there's an interesting stat. I memorized this one because it was important. If you're over 60 and you can exercise, doesn't have to be super intense, but some resistance exercises can be with or without weights twice a week. It reduces your all-cause mortality by 50% and reduces your chance of cancer by threefold.
Whoa.
Yeah, your body, the signals you give your body from exercise and moving is that I'm still useful. I still want to be here, right? The other thing in the mental game is don't retire. You know, Google the correlation between retirement and death. It's like 5 years.
Whoa.
It's really, so, you know, when you retire and you don't feel purpose in your life, you know, I'm going to read something from, this is the Longevity Practices book, and there's a whole section on mindset here, and I just think it's really so important. So I'm going to read this to you. It says, in a study of 69,744 women and 1,429 men, this is unusual because it's more women than men, published in the prestigious journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, you know, super high-end peer-reviewed publication, it was found that optimistic people lived as much as 15% longer than pessimists.
15?
1-5.
Wow.
Pretty amazing. Your mindset matters. And, you know, making use of your body and being out there and having purpose and all of these things are subtle clues, right? We all know people that very close to their husband or wife and their spouse dies and then they die weeks later, right? Here's another story here. One of my favorite stories illustrating the power of mind over a lifespan comes from the annals of American history. As it turns out, in an extraordinary demonstration of the will to live, two of America's founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, both willed themselves to live long enough to see the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence.
Wow.
Even though in the early 1800s, the average lifespan was only 44 years old, Jefferson, who was then 83, and Adams, who was 90, made it to July 4th, 1826, both dying on that exact date, the 50th anniversary of the nation's founding.
Wow.
Amazing.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I love that story. Having purpose in life, being optimistic, making use of your body, all of these things are fundamental. And when I think about a longevity mindset, it is really, you know, I live with this every day. I care about this every day. I think this is the most exciting time ever in human history to be alive with what's going on and opening up the space frontier with AI.
Because of the rate of change?
Because of the rate of change, because of the rate of potential. It's like an infinite, you know, I mean, if you were born 100 years ago, and every year, right, at my Abundance 360 Summit, I look back 100 years and I look at like, what was life like 100 years ago? And what was the rate of innovation 100 years ago? And the numbers and the examples are crazily slow. And I don't remember 1923. I remember 1922. There were 7 breakthroughs in that year. I mean, not like a 7 in a week or 7 in a month. It was 7 in the entire year. And I searched everywhere, patent filings, headlines, write-ups. And so it was like the water ski was invented. A mechanical garage door opener, a retractable roof for the Ford Model T, Vegemite was on the list. I mean, I was searching for stuff. I was searching for stuff.
When
right?
one of the 7 is Vegemite, we're in trouble.
A blender for making malts, and it was like the pace of change was so slow. And we're living in a world today where there's like massive breakthroughs, you know, every hour of the day.
It's a rate of change, though, that I think now is giving people anxiety.
Absolutely.
How do you help people navigate that?
Because I think that the ability, I define entrepreneurs as people who find problems and solve problems. And I think entrepreneurs are more empowered than ever before to solve problems, and that entrepreneurs are in our world creating a better and more capable world. I mean, I think we take for granted the fact that, on our phone, we've got what we would have spent tens of millions of dollars if it was even possible 20 years ago for two-way free video conferencing, right? Every game, every book, every piece of music accessible for free. And we forget the incredible world we live in. I think people who are more in teaching meditation and spirituality are going to help people deal with the anxiety. But I want folks to realize the magical universe they're living in. I think about creating a world in which every mom knows her kids has access to the best healthcare, education, all the food, water, energy, right? This is the world of abundance. When I first wrote Abundance with Stephen Kotler 12 years ago, I talked about creating a world, not of luxury, but a world of possibility, right? And I still believe that. And there's no velocity switch. There's no on-off switch to this technology. It's happening. So what do you dream about? What do you wish you had? What do you want to do? I mean, you can put it all away and go live in the forest.
And people will.
And people will, but most choose not to.
It's interesting. I don't know if I ever showed you the comic that I did called Neon Future, but it was contemplating this idea: what happens when AI shows up and when brain-computer interfaces exist and people are able to augment their bodies? What happens? And my thesis is, and I think this will bear out, that society will bifurcate.
Absolutely.
And you will get people who are like, no way, I'm not going to augment myself in any way, shape, or form. AI is the devil. And they will fight to keep society the way that it is.
We saw a Luddite society occur. We have seen parts of that, a rejection of technology. Right? We saw the Amish rejecting, the Ford Model T and electricity. But I think people desire convenience. They desire power. They desire having their hopes and dreams fulfilled. I don't know. I think they will bifurcate, but I think the vast majority will pursue accessing all of it.
It's interesting. I think it will play out something like this. I think that the rate of change is going to cause a lot of people a lot of turmoil. They will get addicted to things like social media and the dopamine cycle. Their sense of well-being will be tremendously disrupted by losing a sense of purpose to AI. And the reason that even in the face of all of that, I consider myself wildly optimistic about the future. I am very aggressively a techno optimist, is because I don't think that evolution, and that probably is the right word, though I don't just mean it from the sort of standard perspective of your DNA mutations accumulate and you get better. I mean, technological evolution, societal evolution. I don't think it cares about any one generation, and it will gladly create a period of 15 to 20 years of just absolute brutality. But on the other side of that will be a generation that grows up with just, this is all de rigueur. And I have a quantum computer in my pocket and there's fusion energy and it's abundant and anything I can imagine becomes real. And the person that I want to speak to is the person that wants to map out where this goes and how to ride this wave well. And to your point, and I don't know if this is what you meant by power, but to me, power is the ability to close your eyes, imagine a world better than this one, open your eyes, acquire the skills to actually make that world come true. And when I think about as a filmmaker, all my entire journey to getting into business and growing Quest and, spending 20-ish years of my life doing something sort of to the side of what I really wanted to do was because I had no idea how to break into the industry, because making a film was a no budget film was $100,000.
Yeah.
And now it will be, if I were to have kids today, my kids would grow up in a world where you just type onto your phone the kind of movie. In fact, they're not even going to type. They would go, and the thing that they are most likely to want to see in that moment would exist.
Yes.
And as long as we're able to understand our baser natures and not be a slave to algorithms, but instead go, okay, I understand how I have to create distance from this. I can't allow myself to get addicted. I want to use these things in order to experience whatever thing you want to experience. Then I think that we'll be okay. And I think, so I'll make a prediction. I think you agree with this. I think I've heard you talk about this, but if not, let me know. The reason that the Fermi paradox isn't a paradox is I don't think people end up exploring space. I think they explore virtual worlds, which will be far more interesting than anything that's a slave to physics.
Yeah.
And that's the reality that I think that we're moving towards. And between here and there, many people will be broken emotionally, and they simply won't be your competition. And so for those that are paying attention and figuring out how to leverage this technology, you will create the next wave of opportunity and you will thrive.
I agree with all of that. And I do agree that there's going to be a period of turbulence over the next 5 to 15 years. And that turbulence is going to come because we're in the midst of a phase change in society. You've had Mo Gadot on the show, right? Twice, yeah. And Mo's become a dear friend. We're working on a documentary together around Scary Smart, his book, which I commend to everybody. And I've had this conversation with Elon that on the flip side of AGI, we do have abundance, defined as access to all the food, water, energy, healthcare, education that you want. Everybody has access to. It's completely democratized and demonetized. And I think that's a more peaceful world as well. If you can have what you want, it's also somewhat of a post-capitalist world, but we can talk about that separately. Then you're less likely to, blow yourself up in a suicide vest. If everybody could be expansive and they're almost in their own light cone, so to speak, instead of having to oppress other people, you just go and you build and you create.
How do we cross the chasm, though? Because there's a big chasm.
So that's the issue, is the chasm over the next 5 to 10 years. When AI comes in the near term, and I think we're going to see this, I think, Mo and I have talked about patient zero being the 2024 presidential elections, right?
Why?
Because I think it is, in 2020, Cambridge Analytica moved the needle and caused a disruption with, massive budget. In 2024, a kid in their garage using generative AI can do that.
By creating deepfakes?
Deepfakes, creating, social persuasive arguments that get traction and sway people's thinking, whether they're true or not. I mean, say something enough times to somebody in enough ways, and they believe it, and stop asking, well, is this true and where did it come from? It's just, we have all of these cognitive biases, which are fascinating. It's a whole field I'm fascinated by, that our brain takes all these shortcuts because we can't process all the information. So I've got a recency cognitive bias. I give more value to something I recently heard, right? I've got a familiarity bias. If someone dresses and looks like me, I give it more credence. I have a negativity bias. I give much more credence to negative information than positive information. And this sort of stuff saved your life on the savannas of Africa 100,000 years ago. Today, you can be manipulated by them. So I think I forgot where I was
Well,
going
let me
with
ask,
this.
what is the thing about the 2024 election that you're
Yeah.
most afraid of?
Besides who might become president.
Well, if that's the thing you're most afraid of.
I think it's going to become, I think we have a divisiveness coming, and people are playing full out, and it's no longer gentlemanly politics. And I think, part of this is a post-truth economy where you can't tell whether something is truthful or not. And one of the things I'm afraid about is more civil war than anything else.
Yeah.
Right. So this next, I'm the person who the glass is not half full; it's overflowing. But yet, I do see this period of turbulence. We have a whole population, we have a whole generation having gone through COVID, who are now going to step into a world where they're not getting the jobs they expected because AI is coming in and taking a number of those jobs. So there's going to be youthful social unrest. Sounds like Arab Spring almost over again. So how do we navigate that? And I've been thinking about that. My wife Kristen Mogadat and I have been, talking about what do you teach people? How do you navigate this? And part of it is how do people survive traumatic experiences? Because it's going to be traumatic for a lot of people. But yet, on the flip side of this, we're going to see, I think, tremendous abundance. So it is something we have to navigate. But humanity navigates these things over and over again. We navigated World War I, World War II.
Do you have any rules or insights? I'm not sure what the right moniker to put it on it is, that you want people to understand about themselves or whatever to help us navigate this well?
I want to have those. I'm not sure I have them formed yet. I think that the most important thing is having hope about the future. If you ask yourself the question, in the year 2023, would you rather live here now than the year 1900? Do you have an answer?
For me?
Yes, for you.
Yeah, obviously
Obviously,
today.
right? And I think the vast majority, when I ask people is, and people who say the good old days, the 1900, they're fooling themselves.
For sure.
The
first time they got an infection, they'd be like, whoa.
Yes, I'm dead. The streets of any major city stank from urine and manure from horses.
Yup.
Life was short and brutish. The average age was 40. You were dead from tuberculosis by then. I mean, it was really brutal. And you would work 70, 80-hour work weeks, and your kids were working to try and make ends meet. Child labor was prominent back then. So we romanticize the past. And between the year 1900 and today, I did the work. I have a book. I'm got a book coming out in the first half of next year called Age of Abundance, which is my follow-on to my first book. And I looked at what were the number of needless deaths over this last century. And if you look at disease, warfare, and starvation, it was about 240 million people died from those.
Whoa.
Right? So you had 50 million people dying from just the Spanish flu in World War I. And you look at we lived a pretty brutal life over the last 123 years.
20th century was rough.
And yet we got here. And so I think ultimately it's about the human spirit overcoming these things. Mm. And so I am hopeful that the human spirit will allow us to evolve to this next level. And we are evolving as humanity. We're evolving technologically and societally. And we are also going to evolve in other ways. We're going to go from evolution by Darwinism, natural selection, to evolution by human direction. And it's moving fast, right? This is what Ray Kurzweil talks about in the singularity. That, in his, there's lots of singularities. Singularity comes from physics as a event horizon you can't see beyond, right? And so we're really close to the AI singularity, which is, I can't tell you what's going to happen in 5 years, let alone 10 years with AI. It's moving so incredibly fast. And then Ray talks about the singularity as the convergence of all of these bio-info nano, information technologies from AI, biotechnologies, nanotechnologies, which is transforming life at such a rapid.
How real is nanotechnology?
I think it is definitively real.
Right now, today.
There are people working on elements of it. A good friend of mine has dropped off the planet to go invest his wealth in building it.
What does it do today?
So today we are building molecular machines versus atomic machines. So what is nanotechnology in the first place? Nanotechnology is the ability to assemble things atom by atom. So Eric Drexler wrote a book in 1986 called Engines of Creation, in which he looked at nanotechnology and the ability to, the physics and the energetics of being able to build things atom by atom. And he writes about an idea called an assembler, which is a machine that's able to grab a silicon atom or an oxygen atom or a nitrogen atom and bond it and assemble things. And a assembler, I could have an assembler in my hand and I can command it to take atoms from my skin and manufacture an assembler and give it to you. And now you have one. And you can have that assembler replicate itself, right? And these are atomic machines. And now I can drop it in the soil and I can say, produce me an electric Lamborghini. And it can go to the open source and find a design for an electric Lamborghini. And then it will take the atoms out of the soil. It'll need energy. Energy is abundant in the universe. And it'll say, I need a kilogram of titanium or a kilogram of lithium or whatever the case might be. And you'll provide that raw feedstock, and it'll manufacture this for you. Now, we know this, like an oak tree seed is a if you would, nanotechnology. You take a seed for an oak tree, you plant it. It just does it very slowly. It takes the atom. It has the information set inside of that oak seed, and it grabs atoms from the soil, and then energy from the sun, and over time it builds a mighty oak. It just does it at a very slow time frame. And so the question is, can you build atomic machines that can manufacture things at a much faster time frame? And so there is nothing that has been ever shown that says it's impossible from the laws of physics. And we're building things now at a molecular level, and in some cases an atomic level. And I believe, Ray Kurzweil's prediction is that it is, in the next 15 years that we'll see these coming into existence, and AI will become probably our most valued tool for being able to produce those atomic assemblers. And then it's between AI and nanotechnology, the universe is reinvented instantly. We're in a post-capitalist society at that point. What has value anymore? Very few things.
Yeah. So what is a post-capitalist society then? What does
my
that
God.
look like?
You really want to go there? Jeremy Rifkin wrote a book called Zero Marginal Society, which talks about this. And it's a world of massive abundance where you can have almost anything you want. There is wealth accumulation for the people who get started earlier in that. But I would rather just focus on the notion that in this world, you can have access to all the food, water, energy, healthcare, education, everything you want. It's available. I don't know. Listen, I can tell you the world's going to get very strange very fast.
Yeah, my concern going back to the nearest term strangeness would be the 2024 election.
Richard Feynman, that's his name. Okay. Richard Feynman, professor, yes,
Yeah.
wrote about this. He wrote in the, I think 1958, he wrote a very famous paper, or gave a lecture called There's Plenty of Room at the Bottom. And he said, let's look not at macro structures and the universe, but let's look at atomic structure. And Richard Feynman wrote effectively the first paper on nanotechnology. And then Eric Drexler wrote the first book on the subject and really explored the physics of it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot about Feynman, but
Brilliant.
certainly somebody that comes up a lot. So the thing that I'm most concerned about in the immediate term, the 2024 election, the thing that I'm worried about is that people will do deepfake videos, and it is distressing to me, one, how good they are.
Yeah.
And two, if you know what you're looking for, you can usually tell pretty quickly what's fake and what's real. But the average person can't, doesn't know. And I'll see a video come across my X feed that clearly is a deepfake, and people are riled up in the comments as if it's real. And I'm like, the barrage of things that will come will be
I have to tell you a funny story. So, my podcast is called Moonshots, and it's been fun. And I've focused mostly on interviewing entrepreneurs who are taking big moonshots in the world, folks who want to, do amazing things, and their stories of getting there and the difficulties and how they overcome them and such. About 3 months ago, my team created an avatar of me.
I saw the interview.
And I interviewed myself, and I was blown away. I call it Peterbot. And it's both visual. It looks like me. It moves its arms around. It sounds like me.
Its
and
lips are in sync.
It's
crazy.
trained on all of my books and all my blogs. And so, and it's great. And I'm really proud of that interview. And I said it did a better job and as a orator and as someone communicating my ideas than I did. It was amazing. And I asked it to talk about what were the downside scenarios of deep fakes and tell me a story. And it instantly whipped up a story about a young female politician who is running for election, and the opponent creates a deep fake of her, and information gets out there. And despite the fact that it's not true, the story starts spreading virally, and her ability to overcome it when it's out of the gate was impossible. And that is problematic.
Yep. Lies go around the world faster than the truth could put on its shoes. Yeah.
I love that saying.
Oh my God, that's terrifying. Yeah, I think that's exactly what's going to happen. You said something earlier. You said people are playing for real or for keeps, or I forget the exact phrase you used, but that is true. Right now, people are playing for all the marbles. So one, I would like to see the blockchain used to watermark, somehow signify this thing is real.
I think it's the most important technology for that. And it's actually the most important use of blockchain. I've always been like, okay, besides like Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies and so forth, what's blockchain really going to be valuable for? I think it's truth authentication.
Yes, correct. This thing is real. Obviously, cryptocurrency, the blockchain, has become incredibly divisive. Some people are totally for it. And as, again, somebody developing games, I'm like right at the intersection of people hate or love this technology. But if I could get them to understand it's just a technology, it lets you do a thing.
Yes.
And so what is that thing that it lets you do? And what it does is it brings the laws of physics to the virtual world. And if tomorrow is going to be more virtual than today, and it is, then you better have something that brings some of the laws of physics, like the ability to say, okay, I can authenticate this thing. So sitting across from you now, obviously I don't have any concerns about whether you're real or not. And for a very long time, it was, well, a picture or a video, that's easy. And then it became, well, a picture you can fake, but video is still real. And now it's, okay, even video, man, is super easy to fake. And so that becomes really disconcerting. And if we don't have a way to market and say, this thing is real, this thing is not, and make it ubiquitous so that when it shows up on my feed, it is self-evident. This one is real and this one is fake.
What is the blue check equivalent, right?
Exactly. And so that to me becomes really, really important. To your point about the election being patient zero, it's like, this is coming right now.
It is
right
here.
now. This is not a tomorrow problem. This is a 2-day problem. And given who's running, this is going to be a nightmare. And so I am super worried. And when you look at Ray Dalio, who's up to the last prediction I saw was 40% likelihood of civil war in the US, 50% likelihood of a global world war. And so it's like, whoa, like these are terrifying odds.
Yes. They are. And it's the human element that's at stake here, right? It's humans doing this to themselves. It's
correct.
One important thing that people need to realize is technology is not inherently evil. It's how humans utilize the technology. And we have so much to live for and so much potential ahead of us, right? Infinite adjacent potentials. When I think about why AI is important, it may well be to navigate all this stuff. I don't know that we humans are able to. I don't know, given all of the complexities of politics and social beliefs and distrusts, is there some means by which a more brilliant, more capable, more gentle AI is able to step in and support us during this transition period? It's a conversation that's out there and one we're thinking about. We talk about AI being the massive disruptor. Can it be the massive stabilizer as well?
Let me paint a scenario for you. And as somebody with, are your kids 11 now?
My kids are 12.
12. As somebody
for those listening, 2 fraternal twin boys. Yeah.
Yes. Somebody that has kids who this will impact, I'll be very interested to get your take on this. So I am actively building an artificial world with artificial characters that, as the technology matures, we can't do this yet, but this will be real very quickly. I want to build characters that you have a real relationship with, that you get to know, they get to know you, they react differently to you, they have memory. And when I think technology has really created a loneliness epidemic for a lot of people. But ironically, I think technology is going to be the solve for that loneliness. Now the question becomes, will it be a better or worse world? That remains to be seen. But with my optimistic hat on, I think people's best friends, certainly in 10 years from now, most people's best friend will be an AI. In 20 years, barring just absolute nuclear catastrophe, like for sure, or biological weapon, that's probably more likely. That seems a certainty. And so people will have friendships that are AI, but they'll also have romantic relationships and even potentially, this one freaks me out, but potentially sexual relationships with AI. What do you think about that?
I think that we're going to have relationships with AIs that are intimate because they know you better than you know yourself. Literally. Right. I'm writing. I just finished my chapters on AI in Age of Abundance, and I'm working on the humanoid robot chapters today. And so AIs will, in fact, you're going to give permission to your AIs to listen to your phone calls, read your emails, watch what you're eating, watch what you're doing, and you're going to do it openly because when you give it that permission, it can help you in an amazing fashion, right? So it'll remember everyone you've forgotten. So when the person's approaching you, it'll be, my favorite, right? You'll know the kid's birthday and so forth. If you want to, follow my diet recommendations, it will, for your AR glasses, it will tell you don't eat that, or it'll have pre-ordered for you at the restaurant. It'll listen to your conversations, so it'll remind you of everything. And people go, I don't want it knowing this stuff. I mean, well, come on, be serious. I mean, Alexa is listening in your bedroom right now. Google knows everything you've searched for. Microsoft knows everything on your email. Apple knows all of your, I mean, if you think you have privacy today, don't fool yourself.
Also, here's what I would invite people to think about. Imagine, because right now they're thinking about Jeff Bezos knowing what they're up to, or Larry Page knowing what they're up to. That doesn't feel good. But if you think of it this way, hey, Peter, you just got into an argument with your wife, and I see from your Oura Ring that your blood pressure has gone up. Obviously you've invited me to listen into these things. Here's a perspective you might want to take. If you remember, she's very sensitive to this, and you said that, and that, might've been what set her off. But look, hey, I totally understand where you're coming from. I see your position 100%.
Super empathic.
Exactly.
Super empathic. In fact, there was a study recently done. It was published in JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association, something like that, in a study of humans and AIs giving advice to patients, the AIs were like 10 times more empathic than the humans. And another study looking at therapists, you're more likely to be open and honest with an AI than a human therapist, because the AI is not going to judge you.
Yep. You can also tailor the AI. I don't want you to try to solve the problem, AI. I just want you to understand my feelings.
Yes. Yeah.
And it will do as told.
So it's going to be interesting, but I think that AI, if the AI has access to the backward-looking cameras on augmented goggles, so it can see where your eyes are looking, and if it sees me staring for an extra microsecond at a logo on your shirt, that shows curiosity. Or if it sees my eye avert from something that I don't like, that is so much information. That's almost subconscious information to you, right? If you're looking to buy clothing and you see it knows from a conversation you had with a friend that you're looking to find a new blazer. And so you look an extra few seconds at a guy's blazer as they're walking by, and it may say, do you like that? And you're like, I do. It says, okay, I'll order it for you, right? So it's like knowing, the ability for it to know you more intimately than you are honestly willing to know yourself is there. And that will build an extraordinary relationship.
Yeah. And for better or worse, here is the human psyche at work. If you have a friend who effectively lives to understand you, to feel your pain, to
laugh
know
at
what
all
you're
your
going
jokes
through
over and over again.
Yes. Like, you will feel seen. There is something so wonderful about feeling seen and understood.
It goes back to that conversation about, is there someone in your life who knows you intimately and doesn't judge you?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. It is a level of connection that few people know.
And yeah, I think we'll also be able to give the AI a personality, so that it isn't, I was thinking about this when you were talking about how we will all become the Borg,
yeah.
And
kinder, gentler Borg.
Yes. And I was thinking, it's interesting because the way that we individualize ends up being a really cool part of the human experience, that my wife has a unique perspective, that she sees the world in a certain way that is complementary to the way that I see the world, makes her an incredible partner. And I don't want her to be exactly like I am. So I don't want my AI companion to be a mirror. That's not interesting. I want my AI companion to be that perfectly tailored complementary thing to me, so that they're siding with me at times, but then other times they're sort of pulling me
And
along.
by the way, you can fracture that AI into 5 different personalities, all who know you well.
Also true. Wow. I never thought of that.
One is sensual and sexual. One is
Oh my
funny.
God.
One is funny. One is pushing you to do better. One is commiserating with you.
This is going to get weird.
It is going to get weird, very fast.
I love that. You just gave me an idea for a story. That
Great.
is so interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. I want to see this world. And for those who say, oh my God, slow down. I don't want to see it. I like the way it is right now. I hate to say this, there's no velocity knob on this technological world. There's no on-off switch. It is moving at lightning speed. Our job is to steer it, to navigate, to inspire and guide it, right? To avoid that 40% civil war or 50% world war, all of those things. Because on the back end of this, I do believe there's a stabilized society and a world of extraordinary abundance out there. I don't think we have a choice. We're evolving. We're evolving very rapidly. So, bringing this back, I mean, the work that we do at the X Prize Foundation is trying to evolve, to guide, to create that positive world of the future and guide us and guide where entrepreneurs invest their time and energy in a positive world. So, I mean, it's fun. We've launched now $400 million in X Prizes.
Whoa.
Which have driven, on at least $4 billion in R&D. And what we're trying to do at the X Prize is say, this is what's possible in the year 2040 in energy, in health, in education, right? Education is another massively about to be transformed world. I'll come back to that in a minute. And saying, okay, what's the roadmap to get there? And what are the breakthroughs we need to get there? So I mentioned earlier of 2 12-year-old boys. I don't think the educational system is getting them ready for the world that's coming at them.
What would they need to be ready?
Not the stuff they're learning in school right now. I've set up a meeting. I won't mention my kids go to a very super high-end, amazing private school in Santa Monica. And but it's based on the traditional old educational system, right? So this past year, they learned the 50 capitals of the US states. And I'm like, that's why God created Google. I mean, I would rather you, and so I wrote a blog. I put out 2 blogs a week, and folks can get it at diamandis.com. But I put out a blog on what the schools need to be teaching kids today. And part of it was, this is what I think. And then I asked, ChatGPT what we need to teach our kids. And it was very, very similar. And it's not memorization, right? So it's how to ask great questions. It's finding your passion, discovering that, and really diving deep into that, whether it's developing video games or whether it's, space, which it was for me. I mean, video games is for my kids. It is learning how to argue your point, how to be a great leader, how to be empathic, right? These are some fundamentals. Maybe it's more philosophy than anything else. And it's not what we're teaching our kids today. So what is the world like? My dad didn't want to buy me a calculator when I was growing up so I could learn, basics. And I ended up getting a calculator and learning how to program on it. But what's the world like inside of 5 years where everything is intelligent? Everything is imbued with intelligence. You're talking to your refrigerator, your car, their desk, chair, whatever it is, right? Intelligence is innate in all physical things. And where even more than that, AI has achieved and exceeded human level intelligence. Right? So this whole concept of AGI, artificial general intelligence, Ray Kurzweil predicted we would have it in 2029. He made that prediction in 1999,
Whoa.
30 years early. And guess what? Everyone is agreeing on that date.
Wow.
His predictions are amazing. So Elon's predicting like 2028. I just saw yesterday the CEO of NVIDIA predicted it's within 5 years, which is 28, 29. So what happens when AI, human level AI, your best teachers, your best diagnosticians are all AIs? And an AI teacher knows your child's favorite color, movie star, sports, understands their grasp of language, understands that they're tactile learners versus visual versus auditory, where I can enter a virtual world that is spun up instantly. We just saw Stability AI, right, with Stable Diffusion, being able to create imagery instantly from just typing. And I'm learning about Plato or Socrates or ancient Saudi Arabia or ancient Egypt, and I'm living in a virtual world for me. And I'm walking around and meeting people, and my inquisitiveness is driving me to want to learn more. And it's going to be awesome. But it's very different from today.
It's very different from today. One of the things that when you were talking about the calculator and your dad wanted to make sure that you were able to do the basics in your head, do you consider AI cheating?
No more than having a book is cheating compared to what we had before books, which was memorizing text, right? When the printing press came out, this art of storytelling started going away. I think AI is a new superpower and how we utilize it. Now, the big challenge is how do we reconnect purpose in our life? I think what you're jumping to there is if you love writing, which I do, I get up every morning and I write for an hour. It's like my precious time. If I can write for 2 hours, I will, before hitting the gym or before taking the kids to school. So I love writing, and I love that experience of like a well-written paragraph. But what happens when I can say, hey, listen, write a book called Age of Abundance, click.
Yep.
I mean, it's kind of empty. It's like, okay, yeah, I published a book along with the other trillion books that are published today, and it's meaningless. So we're going to have to reconnect meaning in other ways. So a purpose-driven life is so critically important.
How much do you think the world is going to fragment? So when everybody can publish a book, when everybody can make a video game, when everybody can write their own movie,
it becomes less valuable. So what happens then? I think we have to find value in different ways. I think we have to go after bigger challenges. I mean, I do believe a good amount of
bigger challenges because it will re-aggregate people.
Because it will re-inspire people. I think our biology needs challenge. I think one future is one in which we're just living in games. And we find our purpose and our challenges in game universes.
Yeah. I think Ready Player One is the inevitable future.
Yeah.
So, but I'm talking about something slightly different. So here's the thing, as an entrepreneur, I think about this a lot. You say, if you want to make $1 billion, help 1 billion people.
Yeah.
I don't know that will be a thing in the future. I think 10, certainly 20 years from now, everything is so hyper individualized that when I log into Netflix, which of course won't exist, but let's just pretend it makes it easier for people to think. When I log into Netflix and I'm scrolling, it's going to be making the movies based on where my eye lingered for a little bit longer.
With the conversation you had an hour ago, right? So you're pissed or you're just having the most amazing day. What's your emotional status right now based upon your emotional feelings or who you're with? You want to pick a movie that is going to like relax you or inspire you or make you laugh, whatever the case might be. And this process of like Googling or randomly walking into it, instead, the movie will be teed up and ready to go.
Correct. And it will be so individualized. There won't be this sense of shared experience, except for the fact that I'll create a sense of shared experience because my 17 AI personalities will all have experienced it with me and watched it and have their take. But now I'm not, going back to when I'm thinking as an entrepreneur, I started thinking, whoa, it's going to be very hard for me to build a big business because I'm going to pick it. It will inevitably be just a really deep niche. So I'll make something for, to use Kevin Kelly's idea of 1,000 true fans.
Yes.
And now everybody is making something just for 1,000 true fans because everything is bifurcated. So I'm making video games in an anime style for fans of vampire fiction that's in rhyming couplets.
And by the way, your AI is producing 10,000 of those individualized variations for the 10,000 raving subgroups.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what do you think that does to entrepreneurship in general?
I wish I knew. I think we're going from mind to materialization. I think we're going from deciding you want something to seeing it instantly created. And it's gonna get there hyper fast. Whatever you desire is going to be enabled in ways that are shocking. So how do we give value? Because a lot of times we give value to the struggle of I worked really hard to find this thing, and I found this unique piece of whatever it is, or I worked hard to get to that point. Mm-hmm. And when the struggle is gone, what does that mean?
I think you've already answered the question. This is why I think Ready Player One is inevitable. So Ready Player One imagines a world that is dystopian. And so you create a far more enjoyable reality. But I think there's also, let's say that you make a utopian world, you will still end up in Ready Player One because you're going to need to create a world that's hard. Because until you augment the human mind, I think there's a formula that evolution is guaranteed that we will pursue, which is that you must work really hard to gain a set of skills that matter to you for whatever reason that allow you to serve yourself and others. And you will need all of those pieces. And you will pursue anything and everything until you get those things to slot in place, which is exactly why video games are the all-consuming medium.
Let me take you on a short journey over 3 billion years.
Please.
And give some vision of where things might go on a single trajectory. The Earth forms 4.5 billion years ago. The earliest life forms were somewhere in the 4 billion to 3 billion single cell life forms without a nucleus. These are prokaryotic life. And as they advance, they go from prokaryotic life to eukaryotic life. That meant they incorporated technology into them, mitochondria, Golgi apparatus, and plasma reticulum, nuclear structures. They became more capable as individual cells of supporting energy and information. Then those prokaryotic cells, now more capable individual cells, became multicellular. And then those multicellular life forms started differentiating into life forms that were not just multicellular, but subspecialized cells, tissues, and organs, and eventually evolved to us. So there's a direct line between these very simple individual cells and you and I at 40 trillion cells. I think in the same way that we went from prokaryotic to eukaryotic life by taking technology in, mitochondria and plasma reticulum, nuclear structures and so forth, that allowed us to use energy and information more effectively, we humans are the equivalent of that early prokaryotic life. We're about to take in technology into ourselves that's going to allow us to connect with each other the same way those individual cells became multicellular lives. And so we're going to become this meta intelligence where I'm going to connect with 8 billion people. And my experience of life is no longer a single ego. I'm now part of a much larger intelligence, a meta intelligence that's conscious on a brand new level.
It's really interesting. What I love two things about that. One, it's a very clear vision of where this could go, tying back to the way that we have evolved thus far and really showing technology as just another step in that evolution. And the idea of humans as midwives for artificial intelligence is, while somewhat disconcerting, is still cool to me. But the other thing I like about that is how much that reveals about you and the way that your mind works. It's very interesting. Like, as I paint the picture of where I think this goes, I think I reveal more about myself than I am accurately predicting the future, because I think we'll both agree, like, on the other side of AI is the singularity. We just can't, who knows what's really going to happen when artificial super intelligence exists. Like, the idea of something being a billion times smarter than we are now, like we just can't predict. But it is utterly fascinating what it tells us about each other to imagine what that future looks like. Like, for me, all I can see is Ready Player One.
Yeah.
And I'm working as fast as I can to make that become a reality, because that to me is just beyond fascinating. What happens, like, because I imagine a world where we're not changing the way the human mind works, but we're giving it unlimited technology. The reality is we probably will change the way the human mind works, but I'm far more capable of imagining the world with technology and my normal brain than I am what I will want and desire and push into as my brain changes. But when I think about, in fact, my listeners are going to get tired of me bringing this up, but I'm really having a moment right now with Minecraft. Have you played Minecraft before?
Of course. I've got 12-year-old boys.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So because I don't, I discovered it very late in life and am utterly fascinated by what I respond to in the game, because it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs without the top part of the pyramid.
Yeah.
And seeing how compelling I find it to be like, I'm effectively naked and alone.
Yes,
like I have
shelter.
to build shelter, find food,
get a bed.
And it is compelling. Like, yeah, when you can really, like, I feel like the rat in the cage that's able to stimulate the dopamine receptors in my own brain. And so now I'm just like pressing that button over and over and over. It is really, really fascinating to think that we will be able to create entire worlds that are designed to stimulate all of our, whether it's love, pleasure,
and so
whatever.
This is where I come back to the desire to live long enough to see as much of it as possible.
Yep.
Right.
Let me ask you a question that I find fascinating. Let's say that to see the future, you will have to witness unimaginable bloodshed because AI triggers such a panic that humans just go against each other. But we get to the other side and we get to that world of abundance that you're talking about, but it's going to cost half of humanity. Do you want to be in the half that lives or the half that dies?
The half that lives.
You and me both?
Yeah.
That's not universal though, which I'm very surprised is true.
Yeah. Listen, I will do all that I can. I mean, my ethos through the X Prize, through Singularity University, through Abundance 360, through all the things that I do is all about how do you make life better? How do entrepreneurs solve the world's biggest problems? How do we enable all that we can? And I will do all I can to minimize the downside. But my mission is to create such a compelling vision of the future that people truly want it and will give up the dystopian potentials to enable this future that they want.
I love it. For people that want to follow you on that mission, where can they connect with you?
Check out the X Prize Foundation, xprize.org. We just announced in Riyadh our $101 million X Prize on adding 20 healthy years on your life. And thank you to Hevolution and Solve FSHD for their underwriting of that X Prize. I love what I do. I love my friendship with you, pal. I think this is the most extraordinary time ever to be alive, and I want people to be inspired to, create the vision that they want to, because you've got access to more capital, more tech, more abilities, more knowledge, more people than ever before in human history. So, part of what I do is help people take moonshots. Like, what inspires you to go big and bold? What's the moonshot? What's the dent you want to make in the universe, to quote Jobs? Right. So, and that's the final one. If you're interested in my podcast on that subject, it's the podcast is called Moonshots.
It is a fantastic podcast.
Thank you, buddy.
I might add.
Speaking
of things that are fantastic, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. And until next time, my friends, be legendary. Take care. Peace.
Watch this conversation with Emad Mostak to learn exactly how AI will disrupt the entire world.
How do we make sure it doesn't kill us? Or how does it make sure it doesn't enslave us? Or how does it make sure that it doesn't give us eternal suffering? And I realized this could be the real thing that unlocks humanity. AI is not going to replace humans.